They say you never know who's watching, but I'm pretty sure that's not true. Right? Hey everyone, this is D, Movieman, fellow cinephile, popcorn addict, and emerging film critic, coming to you with reliable recaps, reviews, and reactions. And today I'm coming to you all with a review for Missing, directed by Nick Johnson and Will Merrick, and starring Storm Reid, Joaquim Almeida, Ken Leung, and Nia Long. Story-wise, the film is centered around a teenage girl named June, whose world is turned upside down when her mother disappears while on vacation overseas with her new boyfriend. As she struggles to uncover the truth behind this disappearance, she begins to uncover a shockingly complex web of crime, secrets, and deception. So, I'm going to start with the pros. Now, much like its predecessor, this is quite the ride. Now, let me go ahead and say that when I first saw the trailer for Searching, I thought it was going to be such a pointless and gimmicky film. I mean, an entire film on a computer screen. Yeah, no. I actually didn't realize this was an actual genre, which is called screen life. I just assumed this was a totally new thing. But no, there have been plenty of other films that have utilized this same kind of concept and format, but I had never seen any of those films. So as far as I knew, this was something completely different and totally new. And although I had no real incentive to go see it outside of maybe John Cho, you guys know that I am a moviegoer and I go to the theater regardless. So eventually it was like, why not? To make a long story short, it blew me away. I mean, I never knew it was possible to have that kind of structure for a film and have it really, really work. And then we had John Cho's performance, which was fantastic. And he really brought the emotional core of the film together. I will also say that as someone who only knows Deborah Messing as an actress in passing, I never really watched Will and Grace, but I knew of her and I didn't know her that well. So I was pleasantly surprised by her performance here as well. Didn't see it coming, and man, I just was really impressed. So in the end, I thought it was a very unique, very impactful, and very captivating film. Naturally, I didn't have a YouTube channel back in 2018, but I kid you not, if I had one, I would have definitely given it high marks, and it certainly would have been on my best of list at the end of the year. Let me also say that Searching was made for $880,000 and ended up grossing $75 million, which is quite impressive. So it only makes sense that we were going to end up with some kind of follow up, which I must say I was really iffy about. Although this format and this genre clearly does work, my main thought was, is there any way to replicate this experience without it feeling, repetitive and uninspired or derivative? So, with Missing as a spiritual sequel, so to speak, we are definitely replicating aspects of the first film. It's hard to get away from that. It's kind of the same structure and setup. But I think that the dynamics here actually do work just about as well as they did in the first film. I really appreciate the role reversal here, especially coming from the first film. I don't really think that there are many films that have dealt, as far as I know, that have dealt with a young adult or a teenager having to deal with the disappearance of a parent. That is a very scary scenario, especially to be that young and, to suddenly hey, what's going on? And I appreciate how this film really delves into the emotional turmoil and just the disruption of that experience and how, it is just completely, shaken everything up. I also like that, much like the first film, we are simultaneously exploring the benefits and the dangers of technology. Basically, it's pro technology and anti technology at the same time, which is interesting. Let me also say that I really liked how they connected this film to the first. It's not something that's super obvious and in your face, but I did think it was very funny, very clever, and I'd even say it was realistic given the way that media works. So when I noticed that connection, I was like, yes, I'm digging it. Now, the casting was really surprising to me. One, because I didn't realize how diverse it was and just how many actors that I was familiar with were a part of the cast. Two, because literally everyone in the main cast I have seen in a project very recently. I just watched Storm Reid in Euphoria Season 2, just watched Joaquim Almeida in Warrior Nun Season 2, and also just so happened to discover a film on Hulu called Only You from 1994 that he also starred in as far as one of his earlier roles. I just saw Ken Leung in M. Night Shyamalan's Old last year. I recently watched Amy Landecker in Minx. I also recently watched Daniel Henney in The Wheel of Time. And quite literally a couple of weeks ago, I watched Nia Long in The Best Man, the final chapters. So that in itself obviously made for a very unique experience. And with this ensemble cast, I think that the performances are pretty solid. You can say it's maybe nothing to write home about, but I feel like everyone does their job. But of course, I have to give my kudos to Storm Reid. There's a lot to take on in a role like this, and it's really not easy. We really are sinking into the gravity of this very unexpected situation, and I think that Storm Reid does a really great job of just navigating the multitude of emotions that are coming along with this increasingly alarming and perilous situation that is developing. I also thought Joaquim de Almeida was a standout as well. Without actually spoiling his role, I will say that I loved the energy that his character brought to the film with some really unexpected humor and levity. You wouldn't expect that in a film like this, but it is here and I really enjoyed it. And I must say that being able to see the developing relationship between his character Javier and June was absolutely the highlight of the entire film. Lastly, let me say that this is very much on par with the first film as far as the twists and the turns and all the curveballs that are just thrown at you throughout the duration of the film and the progression of the story. There's a point here where things get a lot darker than I expected them to. The first film had a very obvious darker tone, especially as we begin to discover more and more, and we are dealing with a disappearance, which is obviously scary, and then we build from there. But there's a scene in this film that had me like, this is not what I signed up for. I did appreciate it as far as the story progression, but I wasn't prepared at all.
Oh dear.
So I'm gonna jump over to the cons. Now, I certainly had some reservations about this film, and some of them were confirmed. Like many sequels, if you've seen the first, then it's always going to be significantly more difficult to recapture that experience the second time around. Although I did enjoy revisiting this format and structure, especially with some of the expanding that we do and some of the different perspectives that we see with that, there was that feeling that we were treading a lot of familiar ground. It's not something that you can really help, but obviously it's something I felt given my experience with the first film. Speaking of which, I'm going to have to go back and rewatch it and really see how I felt about the soundtrack and the score, because I don't recall it being really obnoxious, but here it just was a little too bombastic and it was just a little too over the top and just used way too consistently. Which would even be fine if there was not this constant swelling and like blaring of music, that sound where it's like almost like a tea kettle where it's like dun, dun, dun. I get it. Okay. But please stop. I understand that it's meant to build up tension, especially with some of the reveals we get here, but after a certain point, the only tension I felt was extreme irritation. The last thing I'll say is that the first two acts of this film are pretty entertaining, fairly enjoyable. I was pretty much locked in. I was deep in this mystery and I was excited to find out, how everything was going to play out. But then we hit the third act. No spoilers, obviously, but all I will say is that once a certain character hits the scene, it's all downhill from there. Now, because so much of this film is reliant on this structure that I've emphasized continuously throughout this review, I think the success of the film and the story that it's telling lies in its restraint. We can only see so much. We can only, follow so much. Like, it's not like one big, open scene and all these moving people. Like, we have to kind of like this piece here and this piece there and that screen and this conversation. It's like we're kind of getting bit by bit by bit by bit. And like I said, there's a lot of restraint in the way that we are seeing that play out. But the problem is that the ending is trying to go for something much bigger and bolder and in your face. And it just does not work. Once we get to that point, it's like everything suddenly becomes very cringy and corny and very conventional. Just as far as the way everything is playing out, you're like, okay, and then this is gonna happen, and then this is gonna, and then this, like, and the dialogue, like, it just was like, no. This is not really what I was hoping for. And again, the idea of what's happening is fine, the development and all that, but it's just like, no, this ain't it. I get what it's going for, but by doing what it did, it really lost a lot of what made the first two acts so enjoyable to watch. So I'm going to give Missing a C. Now, I will say that so much of this still worked in ways I was not expecting given all the reservations I had initially. But is Searching by far the superior film? Absolutely. Especially with the finale in mind. I feel like Searching had a finale that was satisfying, but still stayed true to the tone and the dynamic that was established throughout the first two acts. Here, I think they tried to step it up and go bigger with the finale. They really swung for the fences and they definitely missed, in my opinion. But I have to say that I am always here for a very original film experience, and that is something that both Searching and Missing have in common. Now, I don't know about there being a third installment of this. I'm not sure how much more you can do with this format, although I would maybe be intrigued to see. Maybe. Missing will be premiering in theaters January 20th. You guys are free to check it out. Leave your thoughts below and let me know what you think. So, once again, this is D, Movieman, signing off, and I'll see you at the movies.